the city was in despair. The war in Europe was at its peak. Hundreds of thousands of American lives lost. Influenza infected the city, resulting in over 3,300 deaths, twice that of the national average. Mardi Gras was canceled that year. But New Orleans was in for a new kind of terror, one like it has never seen before. On the morning of May 23rd, 1918, at approximately 5 a.m., an Italian cobbler named Joseph Maggio was awakened by a series of strange noises coming from his brother's bedroom. He quickly woke up his brother Andrew, and the two rushed in to investigate. Upon entering, they saw him lying on the bed in a pool of blood and gasping for air. Joseph was barely alive. On entering the room further, Andrew and Jake came across an even more disturbing sight. On the floor lay the body of Joseph's wife of 15 years, Catherine. She was dead. Her throat had been slashed from ear to ear. Her head had almost been severed. Joseph quickly lost his fight to stay alive. The police arrived at the scene soon after. This was the beginning of nearly a year-long reign of terror from someone who would go down in history and be known as the Axeman. Joseph and Catherine had been struck in the head with an axe before their throats were viciously slit with a razor. The murder weapon used belonged to the brother of Joseph Maggio. It was located on the blood-stained steps leading up to the house. Nearby was a razor that was used to slit their throats. This was also the property of Andrew Maggio, who was a local barber by trade. An investigation soon found the point of entry the killer had used to gain access to the apartment. A panel had been chiseled out of the back door of the apartment. Further investigation showed a safe had been opened and emptied, but the evidence suggests robbery wasn't the motive. The killer left behind several valuables, including Catherine's collection of diamond rings and over $100 in cash. The police concluded the safe had been left open in an attempt to cover up the real motive. During the investigation, a neighbor said they had seen Andrew Maggio returning home drunk at around 3 a.m. that morning. A co-worker of Andrew's told police that Andrew had taken the razor home with him from work that day. Along with the staged opening of the safe, Andrew was considered the prime suspect of the murders. During the investigation with police, Andrew admitted he had come home drunk in the early morning hours. He was celebrating the fact that he received a draft notice from the Army, which meant he would be serving to fight in the First World War. He repeatedly denied he had anything to do with the murders. Regardless of their pleas, Andrew and his brother Jake were both arrested for the murder of his brother Joseph Maggio and his wife Catherine. A few days later, both men were released due to lack of evidence against them. A block away from where the Maggios lived, detectives found on the corner of Magnolia and Upper Line Street a strange message on the sidewalk. Written in chalk, it read, "Miss Maggio is going to sit up tonight, just like Miss Tooney." The police were clueless on what the message meant. It was quickly reported to the press. It was believed the message was related to a series of unsolved murders which occurred in the area in 1911. The victims were three Italian grocers by the name of Coretti, Rossetti, and Tony Sciarramba. Sciarramba was murdered with his wife, and it was believed that the message was referring to those murders. On August 3rd, 1910, August and Harriet Crudy, who owned a local grocery store, were attacked. Both survived the incident. Robbery seemed to be the motive. The following month in September, Joseph and Concetta Rossetti were also Italian grocers who were attacked in their home. The intruder took nothing and quickly fled when a neighbor heard the screams and quickly ran towards the house. Tony Sciarramba and his wife Joanne were murdered together in 1912. The attacker got through a window and attacked the couple while they were asleep. There was a major difference in this case. The attacker shot both victims. As in the other cases, the couple were Italian grocers. A murder not recorded in the news did take place in 1911 and did share similarities to the murder of Joseph and Catherine Maggio. Italian grocer Joseph Davy was attacked at his home on the night of June 26, 1911. He was brutally beaten. His brains were visible from the inflicted wounds. Davy would pass away in the hospital the following day. His pregnant wife, Mary, who was just 16 years old, survived the attack. One of the theories surrounding these previous attacks was that it was the work of the Black Hand, an early mafia gang. The gang would extort money from Italian businesses by sending a letter telling them if they failed to comply, there would be severe consequences, including death. In the case of Joseph Davy, several of these letters were discovered by his wife after the murder. On the morning of June 28, 1918, at approximately 7 a.m., John Zanka, a local baker, was delivering his daily orders. When he arrived at the grocery store owned by Louis Bessemer, upon his arrival, he seen the store was closed. Being surprised to see it not open yet, he walked around the back of the building and planned to leave the delivery there. While doing so, Zanka noticed that a panel in the back door had been chiseled out. Concerned, he decided to knock on the door. After several knocks, the owner of the store, Louis Bessemer, opened the door. Louis Bessemer's face was covered in blood. When Zanka asked what happened, he said nothing. Zanka decided to enter the grocer's home. Harriet Anna Lowe, the wife of Louis Bessemer, laid unconscious and barely alive, covered in blood. Zanka, despite the objections of Louis Bessemer, contacted the police. Bessemer told detectives that he had been asleep when he felt a blow to his head. Upon waking, he claimed he didn't see his attacker, but did see Anna lying covered in blood in the hallway. He carried her, placed her in the bed, and was about ready to call for an ambulance. That's when Zanka knocked on the door. Bessemer did confess that Lowe wasn't his real life. He had met her in Florida 3 months prior, and when he moved to New Orleans, she came with him. Detectives arrested Louis Obicon, an employee of Bessemer's store. Obicon, who had no alibi at the time of the attack, made him an easy target. It was soon apparent that he wasn't the murderer, and soon their attentions turned to Louis Bessemer. Because of the current war, suspicion was cast on many foreigners from accusations cast by possibly them being involved in espionage. Stories quickly spread that Louis Bessemer wasn't a Polish immigrant he claimed, but he was a German spy. Thus it became common belief that Louis Bessemer had attacked Anna after she discovered his secret. When Harriet Anna Lowe regained consciousness and was questioned by detectives, she stated that she had always thought Bessemer may be a spy and always felt like he was hiding something. Bessemer was soon arrested. Detectives searched Bessemer's home and checked into his background. No evidence was found to suggest Bessemer was involved in espionage in any way, and he was soon released. Harriet Anna Lowe was proving to be an unreliable witness. She soon recanted her spy story and quickly claimed another man had attacked her. Her story would change several times. She passed away on August 5th, 1918, 8 days after the initial attack, after failing to recover from an operation on her wounds. Before her death, Harriet Anna Lowe would once more claim Louis Bessemer was her attacker. Bessemer was arrested again and charged with murder. It took 9 months before Louis Bessemer's case was heard. On May 1st, 1919, he was found not guilty, with the jury taking only 10 minutes to decide his fate. The unreliable statement from the victim was the only evidence against Louis Bessemer. Also, the fact that during the 9 months behind bars, several similar attacks had taken place, which convinced the jury there was another attacker committing new crimes. On the evening of August 5th, 1918, the same day Louis Bessemer was arrested for the murder of Harriet Anna Lowe, the Axeman of New Orleans would claim another victim. Edward Schneider returned home after working late. Even though it was late, he was still expecting his wife Mary to be awake, as she often was until he came home at the end of the day. But instead, when he arrived home, he found the home very quiet. Edward Schneider called out his wife's name, but only heard silence. So he went to see if she was sleeping upstairs. Upon entering the bedroom, Edward found a disturbing scene. On the bed, covered in blood, was his wife Mary, who was 8 months pregnant. She had received several vicious blows to her head. Her front teeth had been completely knocked out. But despite this, Mary Schneider was still alive. Mary spent several days at the local charity hospital. She was in critical condition. When she regained consciousness, she was questioned by the investigators. But Mary Schneider was unable to offer any description of her attackers. She said she was asleep in bed and she woke up to see a shadowy figure standing over her, striking blows down upon her head. She could remember nothing else. Amazingly, Mary quickly recovered from the brutal assault, and 3 weeks later, her and her husband welcomed a new member to their family when Mary gave birth to a healthy baby daughter. Just 5 days after the attack on Mary Schneider, the Axeman of New Orleans would strike again. In the early hours of August 10th, Mary and Paulina Bruno were asleep when a series of loud noises woke them. The noises seemed to be coming from the bedroom of their uncle, Joseph Romano, who lived with them. As Pauline got up to investigate, she had a terrifying sight of a shadowy figure standing at the foot of her bed. Pauline screamed loudly, and it sent the figure fleeing from the house. Pauline would later describe the man as being tall and heavyset, but very quick. She also stated he was wearing a suit and a dark hat. Mary and Pauline went to check on their uncle. He had several wounds to his face and skull. He was covered in blood. Despite this, he was still fully conscious. They asked him if he knew who had done it, but he stated he didn't know, and then he lost consciousness. Although he was alive when he arrived at the hospital, Joseph Romano died shortly afterwards. Joseph's room had been completely ransacked, but it wasn't known whether anything was missing or not. Further inspection of the property found the entry had been gained through a panel chiseled out of the door, exactly as the others had been. Upon a search of the premises, the detectives found the blood-stained axe in the yard. The police were desperate in their hunt for a suspect. At first, they thought the Black Hand could be responsible, but not all the victims had been Italian, making a connection hard to find. Also, the fact that several women were victims made the police question the Black Hand's involvement due to their no women or children code. A lone individual seemed to be the likely culprit. Panic set in the community. Much of the fear was caused by the press coverage of the attacks. However, no more attacks occurred in 1918. After the series of attacks, the Axeman of New Orleans had stopped.